Hi, everyone. All right, it is time at long last for our ranking show after the day of Winnie the Pooh binge watching that we had. It is important to tell you that it did happen a while ago, and here we are nearly 3 months later getting to our list because I had some definite opinions the day we watched all of these Winnie the Pooh features, and then life happened and we forgot to get this going. And so now we are ranking all of the Winnie the Pooh features that we watched way back on March 19th. So it was right at the beginning of quarantine. All of the parents were trying to figure out something to do with our children so we wouldn't go crazy and they wouldn't go crazy and then we wouldn't get in trouble for harming each other. And we decided to do a Winnie the Pooh marathon, as it were. Philip took a look at everything on Winnie the Pooh and decided on what our day would look like. Because it could have actually been more than one day, but we came up with some parameters. So he'll talk about that in a second. And so we watched all of these movies, and then we came up with some ideas on how we felt they were, because some were better than others. We had definite opinions about those, so we thought we would share them with all of you so you could agree or disagree with what we thought. In any case, our family is full of Winnie the Pooh fans. I've been a Winnie the Pooh fan for life in all these many years, and once the kids were able to go out and about in the world, we would start playing Pooh Sticks with our children. And that involved us going on a nature walk and then doing these Pooh Sticks. But most people who watched us on Facebook and would see our little videos wouldn't always understand. They wouldn't watch it to the end, so they wouldn't really know what Pooh Sticks really was. But it is literally a game that Winnie the Pooh plays with his friends from the house on Pooh Corner. And it's a lot of fun. We used to do it with our kids. We'd see a bridge. We'd notice the flow of water. Everybody would grab a stick. We'd throw it down on one side, and the stick that came out on the other side of the bridge first was the winner. So it was pretty cool, and that's basically what we did. And therefore, all of our children have sort of grown up really liking Winnie the Pooh. So we decided that, again, in quarantine, early in our shelter in place, we would have this day, which ended up to be a lot of fun. And maybe we'll do it again in the future for another series or not. So we came up with these parameters that Philip's going to tell you about, because he was pretty specific in his research about how long it would take us to do these things and what we should or should not watch. So take it away.
Now, for convenience's sake, we only watched what we could find on Disney Plus, which amounted to 8 movies, 5 of which were full movies, 3 of which were direct-to-video movies. We also watched, at the very end, because we watched these in release order, we watched Christopher Robin, the new Disney one that's live action, and we enjoyed it. Do you have any specific thoughts on Christopher Robin?
Well, that one was not on Disney Plus.
Yes.
I believe.
Well, it was on Disney Plus, but it was not released yet. It was scheduled to release, but we own the DVD.
Yes, so we did watch that one and enjoyed it quite a bit, but then I think we felt because it wasn't...
It's not really in the same category as the other animated Pooh movies, which is why we're doing a little nod to it now, and we probably won't bring it up again.
Yeah, we highly recommend it, but it really wasn't under the realm of things that were written by A.A. Milne in his series of things. I mean, it did talk about portions of things that were in the book about Winnie the Pooh, but it really was about Christopher Robin, and it was live action, so we felt like it didn't categorize well.
Yeah, it was very much its own beast.
We felt like our rankings went with our top 3 choices being clearly outshining the rest of the choices. And then there's one that kind of is middle of the road. And then the remaining 4, which are the ones we were going to start with, were not... Terrible. Well, not terrible per se, but not our favorite, and could almost be interchangeable.
We had very specific issues with each one, and it was hard to figure out which issue was the worst.
So to rank them from worst to less worst to possibly lesser worst was basically just which of the specific annoyances that I had with these last 4 movies, what was the thing that I least liked. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to tell you what the movie was, and then Philip will give you a little brief synopsis of it, and we'll tell you why it placed where it placed. Okay, so disclaimer first, there might be spoilers. So if you haven't seen these movies, we might be spoiling them for you. And without further ado,
the reveal of the worst Winnie the Pooh movie,
of the Winnie the
in
Pooh
our
movies,
opinion, mostly moms,
is Pooh's Heffalump movie. I feel like applause may not be the right... I don't know if slow clap will work either. But anyway, it was released in 2005, and the synopsis for Pooh, Heffalump movie, Philip?
Rue finds a Heffalump in the woods, and they befriend each other, but all the other animals in the 100 Acre Woods are afraid of the Heffalump, and the Heffalump is afraid of the main Winnie the Pooh cast. The main cast try to catch the Heffalump, and Roo gets in danger, and the mother Heffalump comes. The baby Heffalump gets a last burst of strength and is able to finally call out to the mother, which it's been trying to do all day, and the mother comes and saves Roo, and then they all become friends.
It's a sweet movie about loving your enemy, but I didn't feel like it was a necessary story to be told in this realm. And in short, I felt like Disney was trying to sell a stuffed animal. We actually own a Heffalump in our house.
Yes.
And I feel like that's not the real reason for making movies. And so that annoyed me greatly. Greatly enough because, like I said, we own a Heffalump. We didn't buy the Heffalump for our children, I don't think. I think it might have come in as a present. Also, I felt like Heffalumps, obviously, in Winnie the Pooh land, we have the scary monster, the Heffalump, and the Woozle. So Heffalumps, obviously, most relate to elephants, and Woozles then most relate to weasels, as I'm assuming. But there's never any love shown towards the poor weasel, because apparently we don't think that's cute enough to make a stuffed animal out of. But elephants are adorable, and I suppose weasels are too. They kind of look like otters, right? I just felt like it was kind of a ploy.
Because they're not supposed to be real in the first one. They're just these imaginary monsters. They just represent an imaginary fear that a kid would come up with. Now they're like a thing.
Now they're a thing. And it was definitely, it's called Pooh's Heffalump movie, and I felt like it maybe should have been Roo's Heffalump movie. Because Roo was definitely the main character, along with the Heffalump.
The Heffalump's name's like Lumpy?
Did they call him Lumpy?
I think it was Lumpy.
Well, that just adds to the bad ranking of it. So there you go.
Well, I probably would not have put it at the bottom. I would probably put the next one at the bottom.
Okay. Would you just have switched them?
Probably. I was a lot more lenient at first, but you've managed to convince me more with your arguments.
With my complaining about
Yes.
merchandise?
Yes, with your complaining about merchandise.
And also, hey, people in Winnie the Pooh land, all of the characters by themselves, without a Woozle or a Heffalump, are adorable enough, and I'm sure they make Disney enough money that they don't need to add another character. So anyway, I mean, there are different versions of the Winnie the Pooh merchandise anyway. There's classic Pooh, and then there's the Pooh Bear that they created from the 1977
Didn't they also, wasn't in originally Kanga, at least in the books, originally Kanga was the outside person coming in?
Kanga and Roo, they moved in.
So I guess there is connection with that, but it's also, they didn't have to use the Heffalumps if they really wanted to tell this kind of story. They could have sold more toys by inventing a new thing.
Sure. It also was weird that the Heffalumps kind of lived in a certain area in the 100 Acre Woods. I find myself throughout this entire thing wanting the 100 Acre Woods to be exactly how I feel like A.A. Milne wanted the 100 Acre Woods to be, not just sectioned off into these weird places, which we'll talk about in a moment, that are newly discovered when a writer wants to write that in conveniently. So that's where I'm at. Ranking at number 8, Pooh's Heffalump movie.
The next worstest movie.
Leastest worst from 8 is 7, and ranking at number 7 is
The Grand Adventure.
Pooh's Grand Adventure.
Yeah, that.
The Search for Christopher Robin. Created and aired in 1997. This is a direct-to-video story, and what is the synopsis for The Search for Christopher Robin?
Well, you see, they have to go on a grand adventure to search for, get this, Christopher Robin.
Okay, so also...
There's a bit more.
There is, sorry.
They go through several areas, and there's...
Of the 100 Acre Woods.
Of the 100 Acre Woods, dubiously. There are a lot of mountains for it to be a woods, and there's a lot of different non-woods areas in this 100 Acre Wood. And the reason is because Christopher Robin leaves a note that says he's going to Skull.
Yes.
Which is supposed to be school.
I mean, traditionally in the A.A. Milne classic, Winnie the Pooh, when you read it, you know that these characters sort of read, but they don't really have an understanding of all the way letters and our words are put together, so they will consistently misread things like signs. For example, the one outside of Piglet's house that says trespassers will, which probably said something like trespassers will be caught or trespassers will be something, will being a verb.
Shot.
But They just assume that it was owned by somebody named Trespassers Will. So they don't understand the English language quite perhaps as much as the average human does. And so again, they misread Christopher Robin's letter, and then they have to go on a grand search for him.
This happens quite a bit. This is not the last time we'll be seeing this
is, yes,
story element.
Kind of a similar plot line that happens.
But that's not the big issue.
No, but and then the plot line is actually a good example in several of these features of when it's handled well and handled not well. And I would say this was one that they handled not well. Being that it was the Grand Adventure in 1997, it was 20 years after the original. So it was the very next time you got a feature film about Winnie the Pooh.
They actually, because it's the second in chronological order, they started off homaging to the ending of the original.
They did. And we did watch these in order of their release. So this was the second one we watched of the day, and stuck with me to the end about how horrible it was. Mostly because I did not enjoy that the 100-acre woods was full of mountains and caverns of crystals and all these other supposedly, I guess they were supposed to be imaginary places as they were doing their grand adventure, but...
In fact, they actually go back through it at the end, and they're all not nearly as scary as they were, except for this one really spiky cavern. That's like just as spiky when they go back.
Yes. So if it's supposed to be some type of allegory or imagination thing that they made it worse than it was, I don't know. And when they went backwards, it reminded me of that book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt, where you like go over the grassy lands and you go through the forest, and then when you are being chased by the bear back home, you go back through all of those things. That's what it actually reminded me of. But
well, instead, they go back with Christopher Robin.
They go back with Christopher Robin because wherever they went to find him, they actually find him, and then he clears everything up. No, I was at school, not Skull.
Yeah, why was he at the... Because it's not actually a skull, but it's this random rock formation. So why was he at this random rock formation?
Maybe they were having a geology field trip, and he walked away from his group. I don't know. It was weird. The positives maybe are that all of the characters had their specific character traits remain with them.
You might think that's the bare minimum,
but
it's not.
It's not. And it just felt terribly long.
I would say the main problem is not the fact that it has all these random places in the 100-acre woods or any other issue. The main issue is that it's just somewhat boring.
It was boring. At the point we were watching it again, it was the second movie of the day, and I went, oh boy.
You were already tired.
Wow. And I will also say this, is we actually own some of these movies on our own. This. Partially because of the Winnie the Pooh connection. So if you love Winnie the Pooh, we fell right into the merchandising ploy, and we're like, oh, if we love Pooh, we'll love all of these. Well, we've grown a little, and I think have a better sense of what we like and don't like. So we do have some of these. So some of these movies I actually have seen, but this is one I don't remember seeing much.
I remember elements of this, although it might not have been like, we might not have watched it on that screen. I might have watched it like at some other like daycare /
some
friend's
other
place,
time. Anyway,
camp,
it
whatever.
certainly, what it reminded me of was, I don't want to watch this again. So that's why it ended up as number 7.
For number 6, we have
Springtime with Roo from 2004, another direct-to-video, and the plot line is...
Well, it's A Christmas Carol, but in the spring, and Rabbit is... Scrooge, that's the name. So Rabbit is Scrooge, and the narrator is all 3 ghosts. He flips ahead to a part of the book that hasn't been written yet, despite the fact that it's a book. So yeah, they just do A Christmas Carol. At some point, someone says, what the dickens is going on here?
Ugh.
That's pretty much all it is. It's like Rabbit used to like Easter. Now he doesn't because everyone started doing things their own way instead of his very strictly regimented way. And now in the future, it hasn't been written yet, but who knows what could happen. Doesn't he go to like a place where like all of his friends have left because he won't do the like springtime like thing?
Yes, he goes away. Interestingly, as you've heard Philip describe it, we have not said anything about Roo in our description of Springtime with Roo.
Roo's like the little Timmy.
Yeah,
and
Roo is Tiny Tim, I guess.
Yeah, Tiny Tim, except Tiny Tim's kind of a side character, as Roo is. So to review, the Heffalump movie should have had Roo in the title.
Yeah,
and
Roo's
this movie probably should have had Rabbit in the title somewhere.
Springtime with Roo and Rabbit. Springtime with Rabbit.
And the narrator.
Yeah, because Rabbit is the one that goes through the Christmas Carol transformation at the end to accept everybody and be able to enjoy the new traditions that springtime brings. But I was going to say this. my favorite Christmas Carol story
Yeah.
is the original. Why do we keep rewriting it? I mean, it's a good story. Obviously, we get the pointedness to what they're trying to remind people to become. But Rabbit doesn't become any less grouchy for the rest of the things. In 2004, when he finally dawns on him to love all his friends and neighbors and to be accepting of all the changes in his life, that's short-lived.
Yeah,
Because, ultimately, Rabbit is Rabbit, and if he wasn't that way, then he wouldn't be Rabbit.
And also, I just think it's really way over dramatic that all his friends leave because he won't throw an Easter celebration for them. Like, really?
Yeah, it should have just been called Rabbit's Grumpy. I don't know.
Good job. Good job,
Springtime Rabbit Carol.
Wow.
Anyway.
Those are terrible titles.
And as you can see now, if you can tell, we've gone 3 rankings so far.
And there's not really been a big quality difference. We could have shuffled these around pretty much.
That's what I was going to say. They're part and parcel the same thing. Complaints about the same kind of concepts.
We ranked them for you.
So on to number 5.
Number 5.
Which is Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year. Also direct to video.
But this one's special. It also just reuses episodes from the TV series, which we also didn't watch because we're only watching movies, of The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So this is the only impression of The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh that we have, and it was not that high.
Well, I mean, it was released in 2002, so that was, before you were watching TV. Because you weren't alive. The Winnie the Pooh series, TV series, was fine. Of Winnie the Pooh? Yeah, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the TV series was fine.
Have you watched any?
I have watched a few, and they're cute. I guess the important thing for me is for them to retain the flavor and the nuances that are the book that was written by A.A. Milne.
That's why they have a gopher.
So they do have that, and I know Gopher is not a part, but he's at least a lot more exciting than the Heffalump.
Yeah, the gopher was not in the original.
No, and he's not in this. Oh, he is in this one.
He is in this one.
He is in this movie. This little feature is 2 of the series. One is
one's a Christmas episode.
And then the second one is the series finale.
Yeah.
So the end of it all ends with a very Pooh year, or a
Very Merry Pooh Year.
Well, a Very Merry Pooh Year is the whole thing, but so essentially it's 2 stories. The first story
kind of jarring actually, because there's not much of a transition.
True. The first story is what?
The first story is about... So they're sending a letter to Santa Claus just on the wind, but Pooh forgot to write something down. So he goes, tracks it down, writes his thing down, and tries to throw it back, but the wind has changed direction. So Pooh realizes that no one's actually going to get their presents because the letter hasn't actually been delivered. So he goes and tries to makeshift shamble together the presents, and then delivers them in Santa costume that isn't very convincing, but manages to convince everyone.
Yeah, everybody thinks he's Santa. What's up with that? I mean, they're not dumb. They're just, The Pooh Bear characters aren't dumb, per se. They're innocent, naive, perhaps, but really, it's Pooh Bear.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious.
The second part is about all of the Eeyore, Tigger, Piglet, and Pooh. Rabbit gets mad and yells at all of them, so they all make a New Year's resolution to change their personalities. So they basically just swap personalities. So Tigger takes Piglet's personality, Piglet takes Tigger's personality, Eeyore takes Pooh's personality, and Pooh takes Eeyore's personality.
It's just weird, and also...
memorable. It was memorable. I remember seeing that as a kid, because that just kind of sticks with you.
Yeah, because Eeyore is Eeyore. Eeyore's not Pooh.
He had a lot of creepy smiles.
Yes, he had a really creepy smile. That was the worst part about it, his creepy smile. Well, no, that wasn't the worst part. It was just unnatural and very un-Pooh-like, and we didn't like it. So, it went along with the others at the bottom 4.
The first part wasn't very interesting, and the second part, although I found it very interesting, was somewhat creepy.
Yeah. So this brings us to halfway.
Halfway.
Crossed over.
We're out of the bottom 4 and we're into the top 4, and there's a bit of a leap of quality here. You could say it bounces up.
Oh, Philip. Wow. All right, let's tell him. It's the Tigger Movie.
For the synopsis, I wanted to say, this movie, so Tigger gets lonely about the fact that he's the only Tigger. So all of his friends forge a letter from his family, and they each write a sentence, so there's one part of them in the letter. And then Tigger gets really excited and
wants to meet them.
Yeah, so he wants to meet them, He invites them all over, so they all dress as Tiggers and try and convince him. The Tigger costumes are much more convincing, I feel, than the Winnie the Pooh costume.
Well, the difference between the Tiggers and the Pooh is that Pooh like just wore when Pooh was Santa.
He wore a Santa
hat. A Santa hat that fell off several times.
They put a lot of effort into the Tigger costumes.
But
the cast.
Tiggers, everybody being a Tigger was certainly more endearing. It was sweeter because they were trying to show him that they were a part of his family. And of course, that is the ultimate message.
It backfired because eventually he runs off and then they are almost in an avalanche and they perform this like super bounce, which is, again, I don't remember the name, but there's a super bounce that Tigger teaches Roo. And they both learn as a bonding experience. Roo is a focus in a lot of these movies.
Well, he's adorable.
It's true.
So that helps.
Yeah.
And people like kangaroos. That also helps. I mean, heaven forbid he was a weasel. Because it feels like... Because he's not a cute enough of an animal.
So there's the element of this bounce that's never seen again in the series. This is the third movie. So this actually came right after Grand Adventure.
Thankfully.
It was actually a feature film, too. This bounce is never seen again, but it is somewhat integral to Roo, because first Roo can't do it, then he learns to do it.
Well, and that's part of the original story anyway. You always know that there's a special bond between Tigger and Roo because they are both bouncing creatures. I mean, tigers aren't really bouncing creatures, but
Tigger is a bouncing creature.
But Tigger is definitely... the interesting thing is that they take the one phrase that he says,
that
the most wonderful thing about Tigers is that he's the only one.
They twist it a bit.
Twist it into a story. That is definitely much more forgivable than everybody switching personalities.
Yeah.
Because they're not trying to be like Tigger, they're just trying to build him up, which makes it a much more positive storyline, and that's what we wanted to hear.
But I will say, it was somewhat awkward. It's still in the mid-tiers.
That's where we said it was the mediocre one. But better than the bad.
It wasn't explicitly bad, or at least explicitly boring, so it was interesting enough to catch our attention.
Coming in number 3, released in 2003, the year that you were born, Philip, is Piglet's Big Movie.
The synopsis for this movie is that Piglet goes off and just kind of like goes like on a walk by himself. Like he feels bad because he wants to help get honey for Pooh, and he helps their plan, but he doesn't really get recognition for it, and they're kind of patronizing to him. So he feels bad about it, but then he, on his walk, helps some other people, and overall he feels better. So it's kind of nice. And then like the other 4 animals like go to his house, realize he's not there, and panic. So they take his scrapbook and they look through his scrapbook and they decide to start following the memories because maybe that will lead them to Piglet somehow. I have to say, I think the main plot's a bit iffy.
Sure.
It's why it's number 3. But the main plot isn't the main focus of the story. The main focus of the story is an anthology of like 3 more tales adapted from the book.
Which automatically gives it a boost.
And I think even a few more, if they're not completely, a bunch of tales get alluded to. So the stories, like there's the North Pole story, the Kanga's first meeting story, and the House of Blue Corner story, and those are all very strong stories. So even though I don't really I think the plot's a bit forced, I do think that the stories that tell are very strong Winnie the Pooh stories.
I don't feel like the plot is forced as much. I mean, Piglet is, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know how Piglet ranks in the Winnie the Pooh friends. To Pooh, he is his best friend.
Yeah.
To all the others, he's just this kind of little, meek, timid, shy, tiny person. So the fact that they're going to feature him is nice. Better than a Heffalump.
Yeah.
And I think he gets kind of disregarded because all of the other personalities seem so much stronger. I mean, even Grumpy Rabbit. Well, outside of Kanga, who's just kind of big, the mother in the group.
Yeah, they're big personalities.
You know, they have big personalities. Tigger's big and out there. And even Eeyore, who's sullen and morose, still has a big personality in that. You always know.
If you have Eeyore at the right moment, he can be very funny.
Yeah, an Eeyore movie would be a fun movie.
Right.
Which I sort of feel, and this is a little bit of a stepping away from our ranking, but I sort of feel there was a bit of a emphasis on Eeyore in the Christopher Robin live action. We got to see him a little bit more, but his personality didn't waver. It was always there.
Eeyore.
Yeah, so that was lovely about that. Okay, so sorry, back to Piglet. See, this is exactly what happens to Piglet.
Yes.
We just did to Piglet what happens.
But yeah, it's nice. And then like they have to go save the scrapbook and they almost fall off a cliff. I feel like it feels like a feature film more than the Tigger movie even did, and a lot more than the direct-to-DVD ones. So it actually looks pretty good.
They also brought in big names, like I believe Carly Simon is singing on this one. So they had another draw by bringing a very well-known musical artist to come in and sing the songs.
I don't remember if the narrator appeared in this one.
I don't know.
I don't remember him.
I mean, the narrator is a fun role because it's comical in a way, but also stands away and doesn't take over the show.
Yeah, it's also 100. Yeah, it's also 100% original because he's the person reading the book. In the book, there's just the book.
Right.
So all the book set pieces are only in the movies.
Good. Yes. So Piglet, we recommend it. You should watch it. If you haven't seen it, you should take the time. And now to our top 2, starting with number 2, is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the original, 1977, which I have to say, at the start of the day,
you were pretty sure nothing was going to top it.
I was like, nothing can top this.
Yeah, you were like, this is the original.
This is
the best.
This is the penultimate show of shows.
But
nothing can be better than it.
It did stay, but it is still an absolute classic.
And I was surprised as well. I thought that because it was my first introduction into Winnie the Pooh, and I think my children's first introduction into Winnie the Pooh, that often tends to set the bar.
Yeah.
Which of course it did, and that's why it's at number 2.
It's got these classic, got the classic songs, all the classic stories. I'll do the synopsis just for formality. It's split up into 3 sections, which were actually originally released as 3 separate featurettes. So one is the classic Pooh gets the honey from the honeybees and then gets stuck in Rabbit's door.
Which
is the first appearance, the first appearance of the gopher, and always mentioning how he's not in the book. And then there's the second one, which is the blustery day. There's a lot of wind. We meet Tigger. There's a flood, and there's the Heffalumps and Woozle scene. And then there's the third one. That's the one where they tell Tigger not to bounce, and Rabbit just up and decides to try and abandon him in the forest. But then Rabbit gets lost, and Pooh's
has to be saved.
Yeah, because Pooh and Piglet find their way back. He's like, I hear my honeypots calling to me. Rabbit was talking so loud. He was talking over them. It is...
Well, and I think for 1977, and I don't know, I was very young at that point in my life when it came out, so I don't even... And I did not see it in the movie theater, I don't think. But when I see it, it's like many Disney movies are so before their time that when you watch them, you just marvel at how creative and innovative these Disney Imagineers, as they are called, can be. For example, them taking the book and helping out Tigger by flipping it on its side. Or they say he was so excited he bounced from page 13 to page 45.
Yeah.
You know, those are really creative ways of presenting the story and being true to the book and honoring the book.
Because that's actually, I think, what separates the top 2. I think the narrator is used best in these top 2. I'm not sure if Piglet even had a narrator, and the other ones, the narrator just really doesn't get
in Springtime for Roo, he was just an annoyance.
It should be noted, when you know to look for it, it's quite obvious when the transition's going to happen, because the narrator will literally go, that's the end of this chapter, and now this new chapter will be in.
Which was only necessary for The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, because
it was
presented originally separately.
And also, I should mention that this is not just the featurettes. The ending scene was made for the movie.
Oh,
that was not in the original third one. That was added quite beautifully.
Yeah, also, it was well edited in that, because it felt like he was just ending the chapter of a book, so that was a natural move into the next storyline when they had to do that. And, speaking of extras, at the very, very, very end of the day, Philip's sisters went to bed, and
the sisters had not seen
Philip
this.
and I had continued our conversation after 12, we got the kids up at 7 in the morning to do our giant long day of watching Winnie the Pooh. Our conversations then talked about Winnie the Pooh and Pooh Sticks, because at some point in Christopher Robin, they allude to playing Pooh Sticks, but you don't actually get to see it.
And you said you remembered seeing it in the show, so I looked, because we have the VHS version, and that version is the original. It has the first 3, and it has the ending scene.
As we saw,
but they actually made a 4th featurette titled Winnie the Pooh and a Day for Eeyore. Like the originals, it was based purely on stuff that happened in the book.
Yes,
including the original Pooh Stick story.
Yes, but it's a very low quality animation. All of the voices were different, which...
This should be included in like DVD releases and
it probably is, because it's an extra. We actually got a couple messages on Facebook from friends who said, "Oh, I just watched that because we were watching Winnie the Pooh at our house," which makes me assume that it would be part of the extras, as so many DVDs have. The voices are not all the same actors, and the quality is so poor.
Although part of that is because we watched it on YouTube. The animation quality should have been, even if our resolution quality
poor
wasn't.
and dated. But if you can get past past all of that and you find it on YouTube, which we would recommend you investigating if you have interest, or you could read the book.
Yes, we have like a combo of the two main books, and it's a good read, and I would recommend it. So you could really just read the book.
It's nice that there is some type of visual storytelling of it, but yeah, read the book. It's much more endearing. You don't have to sit through the awful animation of it all.
I find the voices were way more jarring than the animation.
It was all jarring, but that should not deter us from getting to number 1. It is the 2011 Winnie the Pooh.
This was not only the last 2D animated Pooh movie they made, this was one of the last 2D animated movies the main Disney studio made. And it didn't do very well, unfortunately. But we really liked it.
It was lovely. What is the synopsis?
The recurring plot line of Christopher Robin writing something. He says that he will be back soon, and they ask Owl to read it, and he reads it as Baxon, which they make up a bunch of terrible things that the Baxon has done, so they go off and try to catch the Baxon, and meanwhile there's also a secondary storyline going on, which actually starts earlier. Eeyore has lost his tail, so they need to find a new tail, and these two main plot lines are weaved together, and if I read the back of the box, and apparently there are 5 stories weaved into it.
Absolutely.
Pooh searching for honey, the search for Eeyore's tail. The key to what I think really makes this movie for me is that the stories are much more weaved and interconnected. They make excellent use of the narrator.
Of how he dumps one person out of one page into another. They get themselves out of the hole that they've fallen into.
They get them out of the hole.
Crawling up the words.
Yeah. It makes a ladder, and the narrator reads, they climbed up the ladder, and that's the order the letters have made in the ladder is made in that order.
Creative. So it's a nice retelling of the story, more modern. And of course, the characters are voiced by more well-known actors.
I think it's the only one that made me actually laugh.
Oh, they all make me laugh. Some out of joy and some out of ridiculousness.
There's a new character, Balloon.
Oh yes, the balloon. And the balloon I think is in the stories.
Yeah, it's the red balloon that he's holding.
The stories in the book.
It's very witty. It does such a good job of weaving all these stories into a cohesive narrative that, based on the anthology format of the first one, just couldn't be done.
It also develops, maybe not develop, but it also accentuates the things that we know that are quintessentially Winnie the Pooh. So all of those personalities, Tigger,
they're at their purest. A lot of the worst ones mold their personalities to fit the story. Yes. But this really feels like, in essence, them. I should take a note about Kanga, which I found interesting. In a lot of the movies, Kanga does not participate in the shenanigans, but in this one, she actually gets wrapped up in things, and I kind of like that portrayal better.
She gets to be a participant.
He's probably the best looking.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
It's phenomenal. And I think it was heartwarming, and it was comedic. It was really nice. How would you have ranked the Winnie the Pooh movies? Tell us in the comments below.
If there was one you agreed with us, or if there's one you hadn't seen before. I'm not sure if we made you want to see any of the bottom 4.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to chatting with you.
So that's all.